Hey there, my name's Brashler, and in this video, I want to talk to you about one of my favorite near-field monitors, the Genelec 8010A. Now, if you're brand new to my channel, I'm all about helping you feel more confident with production gear no matter where you're starting from. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, first thing I want to mention is I teamed up with Sweetwater and Genelec, and they sent this monitor to me because I didn't actually own a pair of my own. But I've used these on multiple occasions at front of house on different corporate shows and different things like that. So I've used these in the past. I just didn't own my own. I always got it through the rental company when I was using it. So I did team up with Sweetwater and Genelec, and they sent this to me free of charge for me to give you an accurate review. Now, my reviews on this speaker are my own thoughts and my own measurements, and everything that I'm going to tell you is my own opinion about these near fields. So just keep that in mind when you're watching this video. Now that we have all the legal stuff out of the way, I do want to mention that this is indeed one of my favorite near fields. And the main reason is because it is so small. I mean, look at this. This is a tiny speaker. Now, the other great thing is that it has a very linear frequency response over the band. So I'm going to show you some different measurements later that I've done in Smart using an RTA mic and a measurement rig, and I've done my own measurements on this, so I'll show those to you. But I do want to talk about some of the features that this thing has. Now, this near field is a biamp speaker, so meaning that there is an amplifier for the tweeter and an amplifier for the low-end driver. Now, each of these is 25 watts, and the crossover frequency is at 3 kilohertz, or 3,000 hertz. Now, there is a good amount of volume output out of this speaker. Now, this thing can get up to 96 dB at 1 meter, which I was measuring today, and I got pretty close to that volume output out of this thing without it sounding too distorted, which is awesome. And this is one of my favorite things about this speaker being a near field at front of house, or for some of you churches that need a broadcast setup for doing your online stream. This is such a small speaker that it doesn't take up a lot of space at your soundboard. So for those of you who are in a smaller room doing a broadcast stream, these are going to be perfect because they are nice and small. Now, our frequency response published by Genelec is 67 hertz all the way up to 25 kilohertz. Now, it didn't measure past 20K, but my measurements do show that going all the way up to 20 kilohertz in a very nice way. Now, with my measurements through Smart, I was using a calibrated test rig, and these are the display results that I have. Now, I took 10 measurements, like I was saying, and then averaged those together to get this measurement. And as we can see, our roll-off at about -3 is about 85 hertz. Now, if we go down to like the -10 mark of most speaker results, because most speakers do a -10 result for their actual published specs, and that gets us all the way down to 63 hertz. Now, Genelec was mentioning -6, and that measurement of -6 was about 67 hertz, which my measurements are showing around 70. Now, this is not a calibrated room for actually doing measurements. So Genelec's responses that they show are going to be very similar to what I'm getting here, but just my measurement rig with my room, I wasn't getting all the way down to 67. It was around 70 hertz, which is just fine for my results. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is their size. Again, they are tiny and they only weigh 3.5 pounds, which means that I can fit 2 of these in a Pelican 1510 rolling Pelican case and have that just as a front of house Pelican that I wheel with me to my gig. So I can fit 2 of these, but plus a bunch of extra cables and audio interfaces in my front of house Pelican, which is one of the reasons that I love this monitor. Now, these monitors also have an isopod on the bottom. Now, the great thing about this isopod is it allows me to change the angle of which these speakers are sitting at. And with this isopod, it reduces the amount of vibration happening into the desk or surface that this is actually mounted to, which increases the resolution of this monitor, keeping it nice and flat. Now, as far as the connections go, we have a single power on the bottom, as well as a single XLR in. Now there are a couple of dip switches on the back of our speaker here. So we can see those dip switches right here. Now what those dip switches allow us to do is to change the settings of this near field. And the first dip switch is ISS disable. Now ISS stands for Intelligent Signal Sensing. And that is a protocol within this speaker where if it does not receive any audio down our XLR for about an hour, it will put the speaker into a low power mode, which will then have it draw half a watt, which is amazing. So you can basically leave these powered on in your studio at all times, and then any time that you want to mix, all you have to do is just push some audio out of your console into these, and then they will automatically turn on. Now the next setting that we have is a sensitivity setting. Now this gives us the ability of padding our XLR by 10 dB. And I measured this on Smart and it was perfect right at 10 dB. So if we apply that sensitivity, what's going to happen is it's going to lower the output out of this by 10 dB. Now the next setting that we have on this is our desktop control. Now when you have these speakers and they are sitting on a desk, what ends up happening is there is a little bit of boost that's happening from the reflection off of the actual desktop itself. Now, Genelec made a switch for this, which applies a -4 cut, which makes it so that your speaker will be more flat when you are having this sitting on a desk. Now, the last two switches that we have on our Genelec happen to be called bass tilt. Now there's a -2 and a -4 dB switch. Now you can combo these up to also get to -6. Now these bass tilt are important because if you have this speaker in a open space, you're going to be getting a very nice low-end response off of the speaker. Now, if you then place it on a table or place it against a wall, what's going to happen is there's going to be a low-end boost that happens off of the actual acoustics from this speaker being on a hard surface on the bottom and a hard surface on the back. And this even gets more accentuated if you put it into a corner. So the bass tilt will help you keep the linearity of this speaker in the right spot depending on where you place this speaker. Now, if you go over to Genelec's website, they have a bunch of different mounting options for this speaker. As we can see that there's mounting options here, and there's different adapters you can purchase to be able to mount this perfectly in your studio. But do remember that it comes with the ISOPod by default. But if we scoot this out of the way, there is a 3/8 by 16 thread on the bottom that you could then put this on a mount for, say, a mic stand if you had the right adapter. So there's a lot of different options as far as this speaker goes. Now let's actually get these plugged in to our X32 here. Now with the X32, we have what's called a control room output. Now what the control room allows us to do is we can solo up a channel and have it go through our near fields with our volume control being right here where it says monitor level. Now this is also the same solo path for our headphones. Now the X32 makes this nice because we have two knobs, one for our monitors and one for our headphones using the headphone jacks. Now there's also a dedicated output on the back of the X32 specifically for the control room output. Now if you have the large size X32, there's two XLR outs as well as two TRS outputs. If you have an X32 rack, X32 producer, or X32 compact, you're going to need an adapter cable to go from the 1/4-inch TRS to the XLR inputs of our Genelecs. Now just remember, on the back of your X32, you have your outputs. Now your main outputs by default are on 15 and 16 for your full-size X32, and they are on 7 and 8 for a smaller form of the X32 or M32, so say the compact or the rack or the producer. But on the full-size X32, we have this XLR for our control room monitor output. Now, this is what we would want to plug into our Genelec speakers. Now, if you have a smaller form of the X32, you will be using the 1/4-inch outputs that are TRS and balanced out of the control room monitor output, which are right here. So the smaller forms of the X32 M32 have the TRS. The full-size version has the XLR. So these are going to be what we plug into those near-field monitors. Now that I have these speakers set up here, I can go ahead and start getting my control room output set up. So if we press View in the monitor section, that will pull up our monitor details here on our screen. Now there's a couple different things that we want to set up here. Now, the first thing being our monitor source, and this can pull from a number of different places, and depending on which one you want is going to change how your control room setup is set up. So for you that are using this in a live front of house situation or a broadcast situation where you are actually mixing live and wanting to have the ability of soloing up channels and having those come through those near fields, what we'll want to do is we will want to have this set to our left-right bus, because that's going to be our main source of audio going to these monitors. Now, if you have this set to off, it will only react to a solo. So for instance, if I soloed up this microphone right here that I have on channel 1, and I turned up the monitors, check 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, we can start hearing that this microphone is coming through these speakers. And once we cancel out the solo, it will go ahead and stop. Now this means that it will only react to us soloing up a channel. Now, with the solo of the channel has a couple options here on our solo options. Now with this set to off, remember it only reacts to us pressing a solo here. So with our solo options, we have a channel solo AFL, a mixbus solo AFL, and a DCA solo AFL. Now these three options give us the ability of soloing those things on an after fader listen, meaning that if I select this, and I solo up this channel, it's not going to actually come through these speakers unless I have the volume of this channel up. Now that means that it's AFL. Now if I have this turned off, that is then set to the PFL, or pre-fader listen, meaning that it is going to be before this channel fader as far as volume goes. Now, for those of you who are doing a sound check, I always have this turned off. I always have this set to PFL for the channels. That way I'm able to solo up a channel and listen to it before I put it into the house. Now this gives me the best, cleanest ability to listen to that channel at a good volume at front of house before I put it through the mains and then add in the sound of the room into that microphone up on stage. Now, once I'm actually mixing in show, what I'll do is I'll change this to AFL. That way I can solo up a couple different channels and listen to how those channels are blending together in an isolated sense. So I could solo up the kick drum and the bass guitar, or I could solo up the keyboards with the vocals to see how those channels are interacting with each other. Now, the other options that I have here is Mixbus Solo AFL, which I typically have on, as well as DCA Solo AFL. Now, moving back over to the monitor source, because this is the important part, we have a couple of different options here. We have LR bus, which would be our stereo left-right bus. We then have a left-right plus mono center, which would give us our left-right plus the mono center, which is right here. We also have LR PFL, which would give us a pre-fader listen on our left-right. So meaning that if we had our left-right fader turned down or turned up, the near fields would be receiving that volume outside of the volume of this fader. We also have left-right AFL, which gives us the ability to listen to this with our volume of this fader affecting the amount of volume going to our near fields. Now these next two settings that we have is aux 5 and 6 and aux 7 and 8. And these are going to be important for those of you who are using the X32 in a studio and want to hear just your DAW. And the way that we can do this is we can set this to aux 5 and 6, and then when we go and look at our aux 5 and 6, these two channels are what actually get sent to our near fields. Now, this is important because in our DAW, we can send those auxes back into our board here and then just have these turned up all the time. And that way we can be listening to the output of your DAW that you are actually mixing in. Now, you can either do that by having an audio interface and put that back into our aux 5 and 6 on the back of the board, or we can do this on the card. Now, we can do this by going to our routing, putting into our input, going to our aux ins, and setting this to card 1 through 6, which will then change these 6 channels to being just from the card, being the USB. And then we can route our master output from our DAW down card 5 and 6, which would then show up right here. We would want to then link these by pressing select, pressing view in the configuration and preamp section, and then pressing link. Now these two are linked. So there's a number of different options for us. Remember, if we are in a studio environment and are wanting to just listen to our DAW, we could send our DAW master output down 5 and 6, and then we can set this to aux 5 and 6. Now, if we are using this in a live or broadcast environment, then we would probably want to set this to left-right AFL, giving us the ability of listening to that stereo mix. Now, if you are doing an aux-fed sub off of your mono center channel, then my suggestion is to have this on left-right plus mono center. And that way you are going to be listening to your left-right plus the mono center where you have your aux-fed sub set up on. Now, again, my favorite thing about using these is to being able to solo up a channel during sound check and listening to what that channel sounds like. So during sound check, I'll leave channel solo AFL off and have it set to PFL. That way, if I solo up a channel, I can be listening to it without adjusting this fader. And then all I have to do is turn up my monitor level, check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can now hear these near fields. Now, remember, I do have the ability of soloing it up in headphones, and I have that volume right here, and I can blend these two together. And then once we are actually in show, I will change this channel solo AFL to be on. That way I can solo up a number of different channels together to listen to how those sound. Now, for those of you who are mixing at front of house, one key thing is setting our delay. Now, on the monitor outputs for our control room and the headphone, there is a delay setting right here, which gives us the ability of setting a delay for these near fields and our headphones. Now, this is important because we want to be listening to our headphones and our near fields in time with the main PA of our venue. So say we are about 50 feet away from the main speakers, then what we can do is we can use this calculation here on the screen and adjust this to about 50 feet. And then we can press delay. Now, it is always good to use a smart or a dual function FFT to measure the amount of delay that you have between your front PA and your mixing position. But also, if you have a laser measurement, you can go ahead and take your measurement laser and laser the distance to the PA and rough it in with that. Now, this is important because if you have this set not delayed, then what you're going to hear is you're going to hear that signal before the PA actually reaches you. And then it's going to change the sound of that input in combination with the near fields and the PA. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you today. Now, remember, these are nice, compact studio monitors or near field monitors that we can use. And the beauty of these is they are fairly flat, which is important because when we are mixing, say, a broadcast stream, we are wanting some very good reference level monitors or headphones to be able to listen to our mix, because most people's computers is going to change the tone of your mix. If they're listening to it on a TV, that's going to also change the tone of the mix. Or if they're listening to it on headphones, that's going to change the tone of the mix. And the best way to get the correct sound out of your mix is to have some reference level monitors or near fields that we can be listening to. Now, the beauty of using speakers is we can listen to what our mix sounds like in a room, which when you're listening to it on only headphones, you're keeping that room out of that environment that you're mixing in. So whenever I'm mixing a broadcast environment, I'm typically going to be using near fields, and then I will also double check with some reference level headphones as well. Now, again, these Genelecs are perfect because they are lightweight, they are small, and they are just simple to use. which is again one of the reasons that I use them in so many environments. Now again, I hope this video is helpful for you today. If you do happen to have any questions, or there's a video that you're hoping that I would make on any production equipment that's out there, please post that in that comment section down below, as I'm always reading through those comments to find videos that are going to be helpful for you. If you haven't already, make sure to check out my website at drewbrashler.com, where I have a number of different articles and tips and tricks on the X32 and Wing and different consoles out there, as well as an X32 fundamentals course that you can find for learning the X32 in the best way. If you want to find out more about the Genelec 8010As, you can click down in the description below, where I have a link to Sweetwater's listing for these speakers, as well as a link to Genelec's page for the 8010s on their website. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.